myself now, but back in 1968 I started in computing at the University of Zambia. And that year there was an article in the Geographical magazine from the UK about the university. But there was also an article about the experimental cartography unit. This is in fact the map that was shown, first ever automated map produced in Europe by that unit. Because I knew about the unit, when I went back to England in 1969, I applied for a job with them. The unit was started by a man called David Bickmore, who had developed a British atlas and realised that automation was going to be necessary. And so he started up the unit, and that's where I worked for 3 months in 1969. This is the computer. There's an error there. It was a PDP-15 computer with a whole 16K of memory. Yeah, you can see programs went in on the little tapes. This is the sort of memory that it would have had. That is a core memory. How many people here are old enough to remember core memory? Those microscopic magnetic rings that you see at the bottom right were all threaded on hair-thin wires by hand. The digitizer, DMAC pencil follower digitizer was what we used. I think she's going to get RSI before very long, don't you? The attribute data was entered on the electric typewriter. You can see that at the back. This is our wonderful plotter, 1.5 meter flat bed with a vacuum table, a great big gantry that moved a pen backwards and forwards. It couldn't do any shading. All it could do was draw lines or scribe into something called field code. The project I worked on was a feasibility study for the Department of Economic Affairs in the East Anglia region. And what the task of the team was to try and dream up as many different ways of showing their data as we could. So this is a thematic map based on land use, and that would have been produced in 3 colour separations on field code and then overprinted on the topographic maps. We didn't have topographic maps in the 16K machine. We had the rateable values for every house, and they were aggregated to a 100-metre grid, and then they could be symbolised in various ways by drawing big symbols where the rateable value was high, and we did both totals and means. This, would you believe, is a map. This is a choropleth map of the rateable values. Aren't you really, really glad we don't have to use those anymore? That came out of a product called CIMAP, which was quite popular in those days, in universities anyway. The team had developed contour plotting, so this is contouring those grid values. We only had the grid values in the land use, so we had to do lots of different ways of drawing them. You get a slightly blocky effect on the contours because it's drawn from the grid. This is a bit of my own work. I wrote a pointing polygon piece of software that would total up the rateable value of all the properties that fell inside the polygon. I also developed 3D surface mapping, which you can see here. Rateable values again, totals and means. My trig was so poor at the time, I was astonished that you could rotate it through 360 degrees. Couldn't believe it. The team had developed generalization. This is before the Douglas-Poiker algorithm. If you can see that slide clearly enough, you will see that the islands are gradually disappearing down the more generalized plot at the bottom. This was done mainly to speed up the plotting. They also had developed some projection algorithms. I don't know much about those. These are the only examples I've seen, and I don't know whether they could do a lot of different projections or how it was done at all. But it was done, and it was proof of concept. This is a beautiful anaglyph map that was produced in a later edition of Geographic magazine. It would be viewed through red and green glasses. Anybody wants to see it afterwards, we need a bright light for it. So in summary, I personally was quite astonished to find how many of the things we take for granted in modern GIS were already there in 1969, when Jack Dangermond had just started. One of the people I worked with was David Rind, who later became head of geography at Birkbeck College. Director General of the Ordnance Survey, and finally Vice Chancellor of the University. So I think his career's been a little bit more meteoric than mine. But I went back to Zambia and then returned to the UK, eventually joined a company that became ESU UK, and on the strength of my ECU experience was given the job of technical support for our PFO, and I've loved it ever since.